So again, my name is Amanda. I'm fourth generation Japanese American. And going on this trip as a Yonsei was a really amazing experience because it allowed me to explore my Nikkei, my Japanese American identity, which, you know, I hope I never stop exploring. But it's really interesting going to Cuba in a place that's so different from the United States, yet hearing these stories from Japanese Cuban my age and my grandparents' age who are telling stories that could have happened in the United States as well. For example, I don't know if you caught in the end of the video, kind of in the montage, one of the families that we visited, she's married to a Japanese Cuban man, and she's did a lot of research on the Japanese Cuban experience. And so we brought her this book that, I don't know if you have heard of this book, but it's called Baseball Saved Us. And it's about how baseball in the internment camps really helped save a lot of, especially the young boys and men in camps, to kind of hold on to their dignity and also their pride and just to have fun too, and kind of a release. And so we showed her this book, and she, it was translated into Spanish, and she only read the title, and she started getting really emotional, and you know, we didn't really know what was going on. She started crying, and then once she kind of was able to pull herself together, she explained to us that it was the same thing in the prison at Presidio Modelo in Cuba. So a lot of the men in Cuba who were incarcerated, they did things like play baseball, created their own gardens, with like vegetable gardens, so that they could make their own food also. So, you know, there's a lot of similarities in our stories, and that's one thing that I want to highlight as well, especially as a Yonsei generation. Going there, well, actually, I'll tell a story about one of our friend, Colin, who is mixed race, who grew up in Richmond, the Oakland Bay area. And he said that when he went to Cuba, it was a really interesting experience for him because there's so many mixed race people in Cuba. Pretty much everyone is mixed somehow. And that does not exclude the Japanese Cuban community. If you look at the pictures, some of the people who you see, especially once you go into like the Yonsei, like the fourth and fifth generations, you can't necessarily tell that they're Japanese by looking at them. And that's something that Colin has experienced a lot in the United States, but it's very different because he feels like, or he felt like in the United States, you know, you have to choose, like you're either Japanese or you're white. And you have to be put into these boxes, and if you don't look a certain way, like for example, if you look more white, then you'll be treated a different way than if you looked more Japanese or Asian. And so, but he felt like in Cuba, talking with the other mixed race youth there, and also just his own feelings that he felt when he was there, was that they're not taught to be put in boxes or to be ashamed at all of their ethnic identity. And that was something that was really cool for me to experience too, because I know that I grew up at times being ashamed of my ethnic identity just because we live in a very racist society. So for him to go, and for also me to go and see that there's all these Yonsei and Gosei there who are so proud of their Japanese identity and were never told that they had to choose between and put themselves in an ethnic category, was really a liberating experience for me to know that there's other ways of thinking about ethnicity that can instill a lot more pride and much less hate. So that was a great experience. And another part of that, noting that race in the United States is very different from race in Cuba, is an example that you also saw in the video where Jiro was interviewing a family out on their patio, and he asked, you know, how do you identify ethnically? And she was like, what? It's, you know, that question does not hold the same kind of weight as it does in the United States. You know, I think here we like that's sometimes one of the first questions we ask when we meet people is like, what are you? What ethnicity are you? What race are you? And so she didn't get it because that's not a question there because it's not important. So we had to ask other questions like when Cuba and Japan were playing in the World Series of baseball, who did you root for? So we had to think about questions like that. Some of the other questions we asked are like, do you feel more Japanese or do you feel more Cuban? And even with that question, we got very mixed answers. So, so just keeping in mind that, you know, as a social doc team, we had to be very aware of the context in which we were researching. Let's see, some of the girls that you saw in the video we got pretty close with, and it was really great to see them in your video 6 years younger. And then talking to them and seeing their faces and seeing how grown up they are, and a lot of them are kind of going to that college age now. And the amazing thing about youth in Cuba is that they can say that, you know, I want to be, you know, whatever they want to be when they grow up. And in the United States, you know, there's a lot of barriers for a lot of youth to be whatever they want to be when they grow up based upon their race or where they live or the economic status, and the list goes on. But in Cuba, because education is free, including a college education, you really can study whatever you want to be, no matter if you have $0 or if you have hundreds of dollars, it doesn't matter. You can be really whatever you want to be when you grow up. And so, for example, Sachiko, she was talking about going into medicine, going into surgery, gastroenterology, and I can't even pronounce that. And Kiyomi, who you also saw in the video, you know, she wants to be a dance teacher. She actually gave some of our members dance classes when we were there, which was a lot of fun. And Nariman, who's also in the video, she's a big leader in her community on La Isla de Juventud. So she's definitely a youth leader in her community. So you can see the range in their interests and really how passionate they are about that, and how they're really able to fulfill their dreams in a lot of ways. Of course, some of their other dreams are for world peace, for traveling around the world, being able to meet with their North American brothers and sisters, but there's a lot of financial and political implications that doesn't allow them to do those things like travel or come to the United States. And that's something that we talked about a lot as well, is the fact that there's this embargo that the U.S. put on Cuba, basically to starve out the Cuban people and the Cuban government. And so you can see the resilience of this community and how creative they are in making lemons into lemonade. So there's a lot that we can learn from Cuba, and just a message that they always wanted us to share with you all is that they want world peace and they want to connect with us. And also, another thing that maybe we can talk about later, I know we have more information about at our table, is the issue of the Cuban Five. So 5 Cuban men are incarcerated still in prisons around the United States. Well, they were accused of being terrorists, but in fact they were defending their country against U.S. terrorists who are trying to attack Cuba. So find more information about that at our table.